How about learning a domain-specific language? Hey, I'm Eric, and this video is not really for the usual AL crowd that watches my videos, because this video is for the, let's say, the future AL crowd. A couple of weeks ago, Scott Hanselman of Microsoft fame put out a little TikTok video and about programming languages, and kind of struck a nerve with me. And I thought, I think we need a dimension to that, because I think there is a interesting dimension in the world of programming and languages and jobs and all that good stuff. So, but let's start with Scott. I got it right here.
What do you think is the best computer programming language to learn in 2022?
Any programming language. Hi, Scott Hanselman. I'm a programmer and I work at Microsoft. You can be successful in any programming language: C#, Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, Rust, Go, whatever. People get way hung up on the details of the programming language, and they need to be thinking about the larger systems that the programming languages live within. There will always be more programming languages. There will always be more operating systems. Pick a programming language, learn it, see if it feeds your spirit, see if it makes you happy. Look in the job market in the area that you live in, and if you don't like that one, pick a different one. You'll be okay. Ignore people who say that this language sucks or that language sucks. All of your favorite websites, pick a favorite website. It's probably written in a language that someone else thinks sucks. At this point, success is a pretty good metric. And the number one thing you need to know is that you can learn any language and be successful in it.
Thanks, Scott. So Scott lists off a long list of languages: C, C#, Python, Go, JavaScript, all what I would, and the rest of the world, by the way, will define as generic languages. You can take any of those languages, and then you can build a compiler, you can build an operating system, you could build a word processing tool, you could build control logic to handle brakes in a train, or throttle rocket engines, to handle traffic lights, deal with databases. You can use those languages for anything. One great example of a not really generic language that Scott could have mentioned but he didn't is SQL. Actually spelled SQL. So sometimes people say SQL, and otherwise SQL becomes SQL. SQL is not a general purpose generic language, but it's kind of almost have the capability. So SQL is built to get data in and out of databases. Back in the early 70s at Microsoft, at IBM. But it has actually evolved. So I've seen crazy examples of people building rendering, so creating 3D images with a database language, database query language, which is kind of weird and not very efficient. And that's kind of a point, that when you are working in, so Scott talks about operating systems, because hey, that's one of the things that Microsoft are producing, but Microsoft are producing lots of other things. They are also producing ERP systems, so enterprise resource and planning systems, sometimes known as accounting systems. But that system, that when you have a company, the system that controls and runs everything, from payroll to the accounting, to keeping track of inventory and orders, from normal orders and web orders, and keeping track of warehouses, where's what's stored and which one should you grab the first and last out, and whatever rules there are. those system that handles everything inside a company is called an ERP system. And quite often, ERP systems are actually not written in any of those languages that Scott mentions, at least not the business logic. So how do you calculate sales tax? How do you figure out how to deal with which items should get in and out of inventory in which order, and how do you figure out what is the account receivables balance compared to something else, and all that good stuff. That is typically actually written in a language that is designed specifically to solve this problem. So also known as a domain-specific language. So a domain-specific language is a language that has been designed typically inside a single system to really, really work well and do all the things that you need to do inside this system with a minimum overhead. Because the languages mentioned, you could do ERP systems in any one of them, but you would probably start writing a lot of abstraction in order not to write boilerplate code all the time. And if you take that to the extent that the system has actually taken it, you create more and more as abstraction, and then at some point your abstraction becomes a language by itself, and suddenly you have a domain-specific language. So 3 great examples of this are, so you're on this channel on YouTube, and this channel is all about a language called AL, which is the language of a Microsoft product called Business Central, which is an ERP system. Microsoft has many things, but another language, they have another ERP system called Finance and Operation that uses a language called X++. They have a reporting system called Power BI that uses a language called DAX, the data analysis expression. So it's a language mainly used to describe values in columns and calculations or expressions, but it's a language. And those, all 3 of them are full-fledged languages with compilers and whatever environments that need to run. But if you go to Microsoft developer thing, websites, something, and look for these, well, you can find a lot of documentation on docs now, but you can't really find any. No, it's not like here's C#, here's F#, here is Python, here's AL, here's X++. They are kind of second tier in some aspects, even though they are very, very central to many things. And one of the things Scott mentions is what are the job options depending on different languages. And I will only speak for AL because that is the language that this channel is about and that I know a lot about. But the demand for AL developers worldwide is only rising. More and more companies are using these systems. More and more companies need their special things created and added to the system. So no 2 companies are alike. So if you the piece of software that at the heart of the company that controls everything has to fit the company. And if you believe your company is special and there's these 2, 3, 4 things that is what makes your company way better than the competitors, then you need the software that controls your company to support those 2, 3, 4 things. So you need your ERP system to do those things, and somebody needs to come in and program it in that domain-specific language. So there are many jobs all around the world in this. There are good paid jobs. They are, as an employer here, they're good companies. We treat people well. There are direct happy customers. It's quite different from stories I hear from other places in the vast IT industry. In general, we see very high job retention. Retention, I think it's called. People stay in the jobs for a long time. I've been working with, in this case, with the AL language for over 3 decades. So I guess that counts for something. But one thing, and Scott's also touched on this, that people think something sucks. Yeah, because AL is actually based on the base syntax of AL is Pascal. So when I have to do an if statement, well, I write the if statement in Pascal syntax, which doesn't bother me. I could write it in any syntax and it will still be the same basic principle, that there is an expression and then there is a true statement and also a false statement perhaps. But people look at this, Pascal, that's something from the 70s. But that's just the syntax. So if I go here, let me switch over to this guy. So what I have here is Visual Studio Code. And in Visual Studio Code, I have added the AL language. So now my Visual Studio Code knows AL language. And the program I have on screen describes a UI component, which we call a page. And we can see that it's called point of sale. So it's actually a point of sale system. If I go down to the bottom, I can see that I have, well, let me remove a blank here. I have exactly 200 lines of code. So, and we can see there's even stuff commented out anyway. So in those 200 lines of code, I tell the system that, by the way, I'm working on what is known as a sales header, meaning that's the top of an invoice or an order, something like that. I define layout. So what I tell is that, so an abstract definition, because I don't know what UI, what device this point of sale system is running. It's running on a phone, it's running on a tablet, it's a big screen, small screen, web browser. What is, I don't know. I describe in an abstract way my UI. So there's a status and I show the number and the customer, and then I have a subpart where I show the lines, and then I do some funky stuff. You can find the funky stuff on the channel where I control a barcode scanner. And I have added what is known as a fact box where I show the total. And in this world, a menu is called an action bar. And the action bar has actions and menu has menu signs. So now I describe the menu where I got a new receipt function. I got a pay function. That's it. I have a trigger here saying that when the page opens, I prepare myself to do a new receipt. And we can see here that the new receipt function calls a new receipt method or procedure here, which sets up a new sales header, triggers all the business logic. There's a function when you scan an item, which is very concise, and either it adds to a line already with this item number, or it adds a new line. So, it takes 9 lines of code to create a new line on an invoice with full business logic, totals updated, sales tax are calculated, everything is done, but it only takes 9 lines of code. There's a pay function which basically just sets a payment method, and then it posts the invoice, and that's it. So a very simple point of sale system in well, there's a few things I can call from here, but very, very concise, because this is a domain specific language. The language is built for this. And we are in a modern environment. So if I have an item, I can see what's everything on this item, and if I do dot, I get all the business logic that's connected to items and all the fields and stuff like that. So just like this compiler, there's a team at Microsoft, the compiler team at Microsoft that builds this compiler. It's built on Rostlyn technologies, just like the C# compiler. It has a full language service behind Visual Studio Code, and we handle our source in Git and all these things. So even though the language might be old, there's nothing old about this. It's just having to have a syntax that was defined in the 60s, where if people are writing in C, well, they get a syntax that's defined in the 70s, and so on. And the last point that Scott touched upon, is the chance of success. And there is a lot of success waiting in this corner of the industry. And now I'm talking from the AL perspective, but you could take whatever and say and just search and replace with DAX for Power BI or X++ for finance operations, or you can do ADAP, ADAP, whatever it's called for SAP, or something equivalent. There's many options in the domain specific area, and there's ton of opportunity for great success. There's ton of opportunity to have great jobs and work with some cool people who really knows their stuff. But if you're interested in seeing more about the AL language, stay on the channel and check this one next. I promise you, this one is filled with AL code. See you there. Take care. Bye.